All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. This week, I've got an amazing friend of mine joining us on the podcast. She's just absolutely incredible. Let me just leave it at that. She is literally doing all the things. She is everywhere right now. We were just talking for about a half hour, 45 minutes before we even started recording because we just had so much to talk about. And I said, you know what, let's pause that conversation and bring the rest of the world into this conversation. She's a woman who has been in education for a couple decades now, like me. And she's got a couple decades ahead of her, like me. And in that time, who knows where she's going to go? And that's going to be the focus of a lot of our conversation today. Just how in the world do you decide what to do next? We got a woman, her book just came out. It is literally all over the place. She is speaking all over the place. She is using this newfound love of technology that so many educators have right now to truly make learning stick for students. So I am so happy to have my friend, Debbie Tannenbaum, on with us. Debbie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with little old me.
I'm so excited to be here and hang out with you. I get one-on-one with you today. I feel kind of lucky in that sense.
I am super lucky to be able to hang out with you today and just get to know you a little bit more. And I feel like I know so much about you, but I'm sure I'll be able to learn a little bit more. And so will some of our listeners. So Debbie, can you start off just by introducing yourself? Let people know who you are, where you are, what you do.
Sure, absolutely. So I am my official job title is I'm a school-based technology specialist in Virginia. We're called SBITS. It's not really the best name I've ever heard, but that's okay. Essentially, I am an elementary school ed tech coach, and I have the most awesome job because I get to help teachers learn how to use technology to amplify learning for their students, and I get to help students learn in ways that help make their learning stick. I also get the privilege of, getting to make sure that the website and our social media is sharing our school story effectively. And I'm really lucky. I have an amazing staff that I work with. And then in addition to that, I have been blogging since February of 2019 on my website, Tannenbaum Tech. And because of that, I've gotten a chance to be a virtual speaker all over the place. I have 4 kids. I could never afford to do all that traveling. And the newest thing is I had a book come out on my birthday a little over a week ago, and I'm super proud of it. It's definitely been a huge undertaking, and I'm just so happy that I got to be part of the Road to Awesome family and work with Darren and share my book with others.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I mentioned that we were talking a little bit beforehand, and some of what you were just sharing was the focus of our conversation. We were talking about what's coming next, right? Because you're at this place where there are a lot of educators out there who have embraced technology like never before. Opportunities definitely materialized from the obstacles of the pandemic, schools being shut down, and everybody having to pivot and learn some new tech skills and some new software, some new platforms, some new programs. But this is something that you've been dabbling with, learning, experimenting with, growing into, becoming an expert in for truly the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
This was an opportunity for you to now take your expertise to the masses and say, hey, here's the answer. Here's the holy grail. Here's the secret sauce for what you've been looking for, and really help people plug those gaps and help them understand where things need to be going. In the world of education, though, so we're at this place now where we're coming out of that phase. We're coming out of all this virtual instruction, more face-to-face instruction, more traditional, I'm using air quotes for those people listening, instruction. What is your hope for education going forward? What are you hoping that educators and schools take from the last year and a half and move forward with, whether it's through technology or pedagogy, instruction, some of your skill sets, some of your knowledge? What are you hoping people embrace?
Well, what I really hope is that people take the lessons and learn from all of this and the opportunities that we were able to create, and that we really look at how we're integrating technology into instruction very purposefully. I see a lot of pushback where people are like, well, now we're back face to face. We don't need to have kids on screens all the time. And that scares me a little bit, because if people truly understand what blended learning isn't putting kids in front of screens. Blended learning is taking what we can, using that technology to provide students opportunities to learn, opportunities to give us information, formative data on them, and then pairing that with really good instruction face-to-face, with small group instruction, with targeted instruction, so that we really can build connections with our students. It's not about putting kids into a program that automatically, is adaptive to what they need. It's a combination of the two. And so when I hear people saying we're going back into buildings, we don't need those computers in front of kids' faces anymore, that worries me a little bit, because there are things that technology tools provide that really help our students learn more and help us as educators connect with our students more. And so we really want to make sure that as we look forward, we're really intentional. We, in my district, we're one-to-one before we became one-to-one. Well, that's wonderful, but we also want to make sure that our educators understand how to fully implement a one-to-one initiative. And sometimes that becomes more difficult when you have the devices first and then you have the pedagogy second. And so really thinking about being intentional about how we're using the technology, with something as simple as Pear Deck or Nearpod. Well, we're using those programs, so we're not just relying on one or two kids to raise their hands and give feedback, but we're allowing all of our students, our shy students, our students who always are participating, to have equal access to that material and share their knowledge, and give our teachers access to being able to address misconceptions, push students, help students take those next steps versus just getting the ones who make the most noise. So I think it's really important to be intentional with how we're integrating it. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. We have this huge opportunity. Districts are getting more money than ever for technology, after COVID, but we want to really be smart about it. The new analogy I've been using is you can have a treadmill in your house, but if you don't really understand how to use that treadmill effectively, clothes are going to gather on it. It's the same idea with technology. Just because every student has a device does not mean that device is being used to its full potential, and that device is being used as a learning tool. And we just have to be really careful as we continue on to make sure that we're really intentional in how we decide to use those tools, and how teachers, continue on using those tools, because I think we were in a lot of emergency mode. And so in an emergency mode, you just do whatever works best in that moment, but that's not going to be a long-term solution.
Well, let me take this to you. You used the treadmill analogy. I'm going to use another analogy, but maybe it's the one that you can relate with. You mentioned in your introduction that the past year you've had the opportunity to do a lot of virtual conferences and speak to a lot of people virtually.
Yeah.
And you saw that as an opportunity because you said, I got 4 kids. I wouldn't have been able to afford to travel and actually go face to face. So in your own hustle, in your own passion, in your own speaking, you have found opportunity from the obstacle, and you've been able to get in front of other educators like you probably wouldn't have been able to a year or two ago. Even if they were ready and they wanted to hear you, you wouldn't have been able to get to them because the technology wasn't there, or that the barrier to entry. I mean, the technology was there, but people didn't know about the technology. They weren't fully utilizing it yet because they saw it as this hurdle that was insurmountable.
Right.
For the past year now, they've said, oh, no, this is another way we can do things. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, let me just ask you, though, is there a part of you that's ready to hit the road and speak to people in person now?
I'm looking forward to it. I have my first speaking in person thing happening in October, and I'm kind of looking forward to not having to do all my presentations from my home office.
Okay.
But I also know that I'm going to have to be, very intentional, knowing that I can't go, like I did like 25 conferences in the last year and a half. I'm not going to be able to do that amount of conferences. I'm really going to have to be intentional about what conferences I go to, because, I have a child in college. I have 3 other children who are at some point going to need college education or some sort of financial support with that. I want to also make sure that, I'm really being strategic. And I really hope that virtual conferences don't totally disappear. I know that, even this summer, there's one conference that I'm presenting at that does have both options. And after going and deciding, okay, should I go? Should I not go? I decided that I was going to do that one virtually.
Yeah.
but I could have decided to go there in person. And so I'm hoping that we've learned the lesson. And one of my biggest problems with conferences, and I love them, is that I feel like if you're not in a district that's going to help you financially make that possible, they're cost prohibitive. But in this last year, people have been able to do so many amazing things and learn in so many amazing ways because learning wasn't as cost prohibitive as it had been. I mean, even with something like ISTE, paying for virtual ISTE is a lot less money than paying for ISTE in person. Well, that means that people who would have never had the opportunity to go to ISTE are being exposed to speakers at ISTE. But it's, it's not just that. Things like, we're both part of the Teach Better Network. The 12-hour lives, I've learned more during those, and those are free than almost anything else that I participated in. And so we don't always have to pay for learning in order for learning to be, the best. We're in this society right now where learning can literally happen anywhere, anytime, and we really need to capitalize on that. And I don't want, some of our students learned better this way.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, yes, I'm looking forward to hanging out with people and presenting in person. I love that face-to-face interaction. But I also still think there's a big role. Some of the people I've met in this past year, I would have never met if this hadn't happened. And I'm so much better for it.
You started there going down a path that I want to explore a little bit more. You talk about the idea that you've met some people and you're looking forward to some face-to-face interactions. So if I were to take us back in time, 13, 14 months ago, when the pandemic was brand new to a lot of us, and we thought kids might be out of school for 2 weeks, then maybe 2 months, then before it turned into forever, seemingly. A lot of us were talking about the need for kids to go back to school, not necessarily for academic achievement, but because of all that they were missing out on socially, to be around each other, to be around their counterparts, and to have those critical conversations, and to be able to just laugh and play and learn organically. And that's something that people missed out on. When you mentioned conferences, when I go to conferences, I don't know if this is just me or if this is everybody. Whenever I do go to a conference, I don't necessarily go because I've seen the program and know all the amazing sessions that are going to be presented. I go for the experience and to surround myself with other amazing educators that feed my soul and invigorate me. So I'm wondering, as we're talking about virtual experiences, I'm wondering if there's a way, and I don't know if you have an answer to this or not, for conferences to capitalize on both of those needs. Not just to say, sit behind your computer screen for the next few hours and attend a bunch of virtual sessions and get filled with content, but also continue to grow, continue to network, continue to surround yourself with amazing people. Because honestly, that's what I've missed out on the most from not being able to travel and speak and share, is being able to have some of those critical relational connections with others. Do you have any secrets, any tricks, any tools, or just some ideas for whether it's classroom teachers, whether it's conference presenters, to say, hey, here's how you can still connect with kids or each other and just continue to grow?
Well, I feel like things that we do every week. I mean, the Teach Better Admin Mastermind that we both participate and you facilitate, that's for what, that's been a huge way for me to feel like I'm connecting. And yes, face-to-face is really screen to screen, but we have formed relationships. I formed relationships with you, with other people through those connections. And I've even seen in my local district, we're a pretty big district, but it's hard to get all of the tech coaches in my district together. Yet we can all get, join a Zoom or join, a Google Meet and interact with each other. And we don't have to plan for travel. We don't, and it just makes it easier. We don't have to find a room big enough for all of us to fit in.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that, yes, I miss those connections, but I've connected with a lot of people virtually and still had really meaningful connections. And I don't necessarily, yes, the face-to-face is a little bit different, but I can't say that I've learned less from you because I haven't been in a room with you, and I'm sure you could say the same for me. I feel like the connection can happen through the screen. And we've learned a lot about how people can connect in places we would never imagine. I mean, thinking about people like Georgina, she's in Jordan. And, and I have connections with people in, and then people in Canada, and all across the country. And so I don't know, I understand how people were worried about social things, but I think we've also, and I didn't know anything about Zoom before all this happened at all. I don't even think I knew what it was. I knew about FaceTime, but that was, but look at all the amazing connections people have been able to have, create, cultivate because of this. And so I think that we have to remember that. And like, teachers learned ways to create and cultivate relationships through screens. Yes, it wasn't optimal because we had some students who weren't participating as much and maybe weren't engaged, but we found some really good information about how we can use technology to connect with people that we might not have ever thought of. I mean, one of the things I keep thinking about is parent-teacher conferences. How many times a parent can't make something at a time of day because they can't get to the school. Well, we have all these opportunities now that we didn't have before. And I think it's really important to make sure that we continue those. And I think you were with me. We did the Ed Camp Mass Leads with Bobby French. I felt like that was a great connection opportunity. And rather than just having it with her district, we were able to get people from all around the country and world to participate. And the discussions were amazingly profound.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I'm sure this is going to come across somewhat critical, but I think it's important for us to recognize as well. So in education, oftentimes we are reminded that our task is to prepare students for the real world. That's what we're told. It's what a lot of people profess to believe. But the irony is, oftentimes we buffer ourselves from the way the real world works. You mentioned the idea of Zoom ignorance, which is something that a lot of educators experience, that they didn't even know that this world existed prior to the pandemic a year ago. Now, what's interesting is 5 years ago, I was Zooming with people from around the world who I met through informal business relationships, because the business world was already embracing this and it was already using it. If I were to circle back to 2008, when I started teaching my first adjunct college class, it was completely online. And it was a human resources class for business professionals. And that was already the norm. But yet, for some reason in education circles, we put ourselves in these buffers and said, that's not possible. We can't do it that way, simply because it's not the way that we did it. Knowing full well now, as we look at the world around us, actually, the rest of the world has kind of already embraced this. They already knew that these technologies existed. They've already been utilizing collaborative workspaces. Google Jamboard, for example, we all act like it's this new groundbreaking, earth-shattering collaborative tool. It's been around for a while, but we just didn't know it. We had this, the barrier to entry was truly eliminated for us now, where we no longer could say we can't do it. We had to start saying we need to do it.
Right.
So we found a way to make it happen. So I think it's just interesting for us to recognize that in education, we have to step outside of our educational walls every once in a while and say, what's the world doing? And how can I set my kids up for success there, as opposed to just creating the next generation of teachers that can replicate what we've always done. So,
and I think that that's so important, because you think about the whole difference between school and learning. And the idea is that, a lot of the things that we do in school today are things that we've always done in school. And, we really do, if our goal is truly to prepare kids for the future, are we really preparing them to do things that people are doing in the workforce today, or will do in the workforce in, 5-10 years? And
yeah,
I think that, it's so important. People in the real world, network with other people. They talk to people through Zoom. They connect. And, I've seen so many more opportunities because of everything that's happened, where kids are now able to learn from experts in the field. I mean, Skype has been around for a long time. Skype a scientist, Skype an expert, but now these things aren't considered things that are like taboo. They're things that are like, okay, well, of course we would do that.
Right.
Why can't we use technology to give our kids opportunities that they couldn't have had 20 years ago? Because we want to make sure that our kids have every opportunity. And, we shouldn't ever make it, an experience prohibitive when they can get it. Like,
right.
Even something as simple as going to visit a museum. Smithsonian Learning Lab has so many amazing resources. And as long as a kid has a computer, they can go visit a museum. And in fact, they can visit the whole collection of the Smithsonian right from their computer. and they don't
Yeah.
have to travel from museum to museum. And just kind of looking at those opportunities is just really important. And it's important for educators too. Just because we work for a district doesn't mean that's the only place we can learn. All of us have the same goal.
Yeah.
And so all professional development is taking us towards that goal, in theory.
Yeah. So I want to try to merge all of this, because I've said probably ad nauseum now, where people are sick of me saying this, but what we do is, if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for them. What we do, they do.
Right.
And what I'm hearing you talk about right now is that concept of, I'm going to just use your own life now as the metaphor for what's good enough for kids. So we're talking about preparing kids not only for their future, but for their current reality, trying to find that balance of making sure that they're embracing where they are, their experiences, their passions, their interests, and the skills, platforms, technology that's available to them today, so that they are preparing themselves for this unknown future down the road. It's not just preparing them for 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now. It's also right now needs to set themselves up for success for the future. And here's my clumsy transition that it's kind of awkward, but I think it makes sense, because what you're describing right now reminds me of the conversation you and I were having prior to me hitting record. And we were having literally that same conversation about you, where you are right now, and is where you are right now as an educator, as a professional, is it setting you up for success today and into the future? And this is a conversation and something I know that other educators, other professionals are wrestling with extremely hard right now. There are a lot of people questioning, why am I doing this? Where am I going? Where's my direction? And trying to figure out how to navigate their next steps, and also trying to navigate their right now, trying to find contentment, satisfaction, making sure their passions are being filled, and allowing that to drive them forward. I'm curious, Debbie, and I'm going to ask questions that maybe you don't even want to answer right now, but where do you see yourself 3 years from now? Because that answer will open up the door to the next question I ask. Where do you see yourself? What do you want to be doing 3, 4, 5 years from now?
Well, 3, 4, 5 years from now, I will be an empty nester is the first thing to start with. I hope. And I really would love to be able to continue to explore and expand some of the things that I'm doing now. I love the presenting that I'm getting a chance to explore, and the fact that I'm getting to work with educators, not just the educators in my district, which I love doing, but I'm also getting a chance to learn from it and work with educators outside of my district. So I hope that in the future, I'll be able to continue to explore and expand those opportunities. I just finished writing a book. I would definitely in the future would like to continue and do something, especially professional development is a huge passion of mine, and how I would, and my visions for it versus maybe some of the visions of where it is right now. And so that's definitely something I want to explore. And as I continue to do work on my own, figuring out how can we really make professional development truly engaging and long lasting, and not just something else that teachers feel like they have to add to their to-do list. I feel really passionate about that. And I really want to continue to explore that and see how, thinking about the experiences that I've had where it's really led to lasting learning, no pun intended.
Oh, no, pun totally accepted. Go for it.
Versus the experiences that I've had that have been more check the box, and I've done an experience, and when I was done, I was like, okay, that's done. I really want to figure out what I can do as a tech coach to really provide more lasting, meaningful, professional development, where it's not just a one and done, but it's a more continual process where it really provides an impact, because I feel like professional development has become much more of a laundry list, and we're educators, we should be lifelong learners. And yet I find that many educators that I encounter, in my life don't really feel that way. I feel like I don't want education to feel like I need to check off the boxes so I can say I'm compliant. It shouldn't be about compliance. It should be about engagement and excitement and learning. And I felt like during COVID, it wasn't necessarily about excitement and learning, but it was about there was a need. And I don't always feel that need for really that personalized professional development where educators are really eager to learn and expand versus more compliant. I'm going to learn that I'm doing this because I have to, or I'm doing this because it's part of my goal this year. And I just think it's sad because I think if we modeled more of that for our students, it would create more engagement through that modeling process.
So here's what I find interesting in that answer. So you said that you want to model professional development, professional learning. You want to be able to speak and share in an effective fashion with effective methodologies with other educators, helping them enhance their practice. That's where you see yourself 3 to 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
But you also already told me that in the past year, you've had the opportunity to speak at 20 plus conferences. Okay.
Right.
So fast forward yourself. Let's just put yourself in the middle of that 3 to 5, 4 years from now. If 4 years from now, you're doing exactly what you're doing right now with your career, are you satisfied and are you content?
I don't think that's where I want to be. I think that I would like to try to expand some of the opportunities that I'm doing now that I'm doing, and really not just be about me doing, okay, I'm speaking at a conference and I've completed a request for proposal, but actually then finding opportunities from that to really work and do more deeper work with schools or with teachers. I don't want it to just be that 45 to 60-minute presentation, which is great, but that's just the beginning of, it's like an appetizer. There's so much more that can come from that. And I'm hoping that I really get a chance to really dig deep in that work and, work with teachers. And teachers are busy. Teachers are overwhelmed. And I want to try to give teachers tools that will make it easier for them to do that. And, and not necessarily just being about, okay, this is how we fix this piece of technology, but really digging deep into how that technology can help pedagogy and amplify it. Because I feel like a lot of teachers keep seeing their plate growing and growing with more stuff on it. My goal is not to add more to their plate, but to make what's on their plate more nutritious, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm going to open up a line of questioning here that it might seem a little tactical. It might be a strategic conversation, but I think it's a needed conversation for a lot of people. And I'm going to selfishly talk about a conversation I had with somebody else just a couple of weeks ago that I think is enlightening for some others to hear, because it's related to what you just opened up. So a couple of weeks ago, somebody reached out to me and said they just wanted to talk. It's a person that I connect with online, social media. They're probably listening to this right now, so I'm not going to divulge their name or where they live or even what their role is. But this person said that they wanted to talk. And when we started talking, they said, Dave, my goal is to do what you do. And I probably had my eyebrow raised for a second. And I responded back and said, what exactly do I do? What is it? What component of what I do you actually want to do? And their response was, I don't know, like just talk to people and share and travel and present. That's kind of what I want to do. And my response was similar to yours. And I apologized profusely afterwards, because I realized that was probably inappropriate for me to laugh in their face, because they were being completely sweet and and I mean, it was total compliment and it was total flattery. But what I told this person was, I feel like at times we set students up for failure, because we tell them, if you just work hard, the world will be given to you and you can do anything you want to do. And I told this person that I worked hard and then walked down a lot of wrong roads, opened up a lot of the wrong doors. And in every path I went down, I worked extremely hard. And unfortunately, though, because I kept trying to look for the next step and looking for the greener grass at every opportunity, I found myself at a lot of dead ends eventually. But I was working really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, I am working super, super hard. You've got 4 kids. I've got 4 kids. There are most weeks I don't get to see my kids other than 10, 20 minutes before they head out the door for the bus in the morning. On the weekends, I'm working constantly. Don't get to hang out with my kids and my family. I don't get to go on all the cool family day trips and things because I'm working. And I explained this to this person. I said, so is that what you want? Is that what you want? You want to forget about your family and your kids? You want to just live on a computer all day long? You want to continually strategizing and doing market analysis and planning and writing and researching? Is that what you want? And he said, No, I guess not. So I'm curious. I'm sharing all that because you didn't say, Dave, I want to do what you do. Thank God, because you don't want to do what I do. I want you to do better or differently than what I do. But you described where you want to be in 4 years. We started this conversation by talking about what you do right now. What does the next 4 years look like? Because it's not going to be you just keep doing what you're doing now, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're traveling everywhere, mic in hand, people are throwing money at you. Maybe it will, I don't know. But what does the next 4 years look like for you? Or what questions are you still trying to sort out? What are you trying to figure out about what happens between now and 4 years from now? Because again, it's something I think a lot of people are wrestling with right now.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are saying, I want to leave the classroom, I want to leave school, and I want to go do something different. But they're not quite sure what that is or how to get there.
Well, I think that through this past year, I've done a lot of work on really figuring out who I am. I'm really lucky that I'm connected with Lindsay Titus, and I've done a lot of identity work. And I can say that through this past year, my job has changed. I joke that I had like 4 jobs this year. I have what I did during remote teaching and getting teachers prepared for remote teaching. Then I had getting teachers prepared for concurrent teaching. Now I'm in the cycle where I'm pretty much working on testing. Not my favorite part of the job. And then the last part of the year is going to be in laptop collection and inventory. So when I talk about my job and all the parts that I love, I'm, looking back, I'm talking about the parts of my job that I love the most. Those are not the only parts of my job. And my goal in the next 4 years is to, in my work in the school, to really amplify and find a way to spend more time on those things that I'm most passionate about, because I feel like those things are what help our students the most.
Yeah.
And that could mean that, I need to look at a place that might, value that more or less. I'm not exactly sure where that's going to lead, because I know that right now schools are in flux. There's that combination between what are we going to do with tech and where does tech and supporting that infrastructure. There's that, and a lot of times with those of us who are tech coaches, we have to navigate the world between providing tech support and providing tech integration. And, obviously I know how to do tech support, but tech integration is my love. And so I really want to try to amplify those opportunities within my life. And that's one of the reasons that I started presenting more. It's one of the reasons that I started writing and blogging more. And so I want to try to increase the frequency of that type of stuff in my life, because that's where I really get meaning. And my feeling is that all of us, as we are continuing to grow and evolve, we need to learn how to do lots of different things, but we also want to make sure that we're giving our best where we're at, because life's too short not to.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping in the next couple of years that I can continue to build on those things, in my building, or what the building I'm working in, but also outside of my building, because I found that it's that whole idea, you can't be a prophet in your own land. Yes, I've written a book, but essentially I'm the tech coach in that school. They really, nobody's coming around to me going, ooh, you're an author. Some people are like, oh, I'm so glad I have an author as my tech coach. But most people are like, oh, you're our tech coach. You're just the person we go to when we need help with technology. And so my goal, is to make sure that I can take those moments when I'm with my staff to give them everything I can, but also knowing that I can have an impact beyond just my school, because, every one of us has our own story. And by, adding to the space with our own stories, we help others to grow as well. And we learn from others as well.
I'm gonna dig deep into something you just said, because I think it was super profound. And I want to make sure I heard it and understand it correctly before I go forward with this. If you were given the opportunity to work in a school where your full-time job was tech integration in a school, and let's say there were 50 staff members,
Okay.
And every day they were signing up saying, Debbie, I want you to come show me how I can use technology in my classroom to help enhance the learning of my kids. And every day you were popping into classrooms and had 50 teachers that were hungry and eating up everything that you were sharing with them. Would that be a job that you would keep for the next 20 years?
Well, I mean, I think that it sounds like a great job. I'm not sure if it's a realistic depiction. And it wouldn't just be me going in and showing things. I really believe the magic in tech integration comes in co-teaching and that co-planning process. I want to teach my teachers how to fish. I don't always want to fish for them. And so the most impactful things I've done with my teachers is where we sit down, we email, we come up with what the focus is. We talk about how the technology can amplify and enhance it. And then I go in and we teach it together. Because a lot of times the biggest fear for teachers is I'm going to get something wrong. And having somebody who has more experience in using that tool helps ease that fear. It takes that barrier away. And then when teachers are learning alongside with the tech coach, that's where we don't have time for trainings before school, trainings after school. There's too much to do. And what I have found in my experiences when I got the chance to go in like twice a month and do those types of experiences with teachers. And then the next time I would come in, we could say, oh, gee, we want to do that same tool again in a different way. And this time I'll pull back and I'll be your support and you take the lead. Mm-hmm. That's where that really meaningful change comes. It doesn't come from me popping in to do what I would consider more of a guide, like how guidance works or school counseling works, where you come in, you do a lesson and the teacher's sitting in the back of the room. That's not how I envision this. I envision this as being a collaborative experience. And I guess my daughter's 15 years ago, I was a technology teacher at a school in another state. And I worked part-time, but teachers, met with teams, we planned lessons, and then the teachers came in and we taught those lessons together. Now, granted, then we had a computer lab because our computers were all humongous, but it's the same idea that mm-hmm. teachers, that's where that meaningful impact is going to happen when we do this together. It can't be done in isolation. And in my district right now, elementary tech coaches are part of the master schedule, part of the special schedule. And I think it's wonderful that kids get to learn. And I would say this to anybody in my district, so I'm not afraid to say it on here. But if the kids know how to use it and the teachers don't, we're not going to have that same impact. The biggest thing that I've noticed in this past year is that teachers were learning how to use tools. Sometimes they would ask me to come in during virtual learning and help them, like with something like Pear Deck or something. And then once they got that level of comfort, then they were able to take it to the next level. And it's not about knowing how to use every tool. It's about having the tools that give you what your students need. And that's an intentional process that's more about pedagogy than it ever is about technology.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that the embedded practice, the embedded support, standing alongside of other learners, learning alongside of them, with them, allowing them to have that productive struggle that we've been talking about for the last decade with students, that's where the magic happens. So again, fast forwarding 4 years into the future, how does the 4 years into the future, Debbie Tannenbaum, utilize what you just said teachers need to also give you what you need? So if it's unrealistic to do that at the district level or the building level, how do you take what you just said and transfer that into you accomplishing your goals and your dreams for your own profession as well, of traveling, speaking, sharing with districts and schools all over the place? Because to your point, it's more than standing on the stage and dropping the mic after a 60-minute keynote.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
part of it. But it's this embedded relational component that I agree with you, we all desperately need. And I feel like our conversation is coming full circle here, where at the beginning we were talking about, it's not just about virtual learning or face-to-face learning. There's this blended modality that we have to embrace. It's the same thing with conferences. It's not just sit in front of a computer screen and get content. There's also the need for that social, emotional connection.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that I'm hearing you say right now that teachers need in the field, in the trenches. They don't just need experts to come in and say, plug this in, use this device, use this program. They need somebody that's willing to sit beside them because that's what they need.
Right.
What you need for your profession is you need people to validate that. You need people to seek that out. You need people that say, Debbie, we know that you can help us with this. So in the next 4 years, how do you go about building that relational connection with educators? How do you go about educating people that they don't necessarily just need somebody to give them the keynote and say, hey, here's Peer Deck, here's Nearpod, here's a Google Jamboard, have fun, but you need somebody to stand beside them. How do you create that marketplace for yourself?
Well, and I think that that's definitely something that I'm trying to, figure out for myself. You often say that you buy into people before you buy into products. And in the last couple of years, I've really embraced being vulnerable and authentic. And that's one of the reasons that I love blogging.
Yeah.
Is because I'm not perfect. None of us are. I go through struggles. I'm figuring things out, but I've really learned that through embracing that fear and pushing past it, that I've been able to do some amazing things. And my goal is that if I can find ways, whether it's in person or whether it's through a Zoom screen, I did a consult session with somebody who lives in Canada, and we were talking about tech. And at the end of it, she's like, this was great. I can't wait to do this again. But we were building a relationship. Yeah. And I think just like we have to build relationships with our students in schools, we have to do that in our PD. And so I'm not sure 4 years in the future what it's going to look like, but I do know that 4 years in the future, yes, I think it's great to have that keynote and that speech, but to me, that's only part of it. I remember, how many years ago was it? A speaker came to talk to us about math rotations, and she had this great way of doing math rotations. And she came in and she spoke to us, but then we still continued. She would come back once a month for like a couple of months and check in on us. Well, now that doesn't have to happen, face to face. But I feel like we need to have something where we can continue to build on progress. And with all of the technology we have today, that could happen through a Zoom call follow-up, that could happen through a discussion board. There's so many ways that we can do that. And, even if a teacher tries something and they videotape themselves while reflecting over, that's important too. And so I feel like too often we're all at, it's that whole idea of that double track agenda. If we want our teachers to teach a certain way, why are we still teaching them the old way? Yep. And if we want to teach them the old way, why are we saying we want them to, We have to mean what we say. And I found that this summer I did all this PD for my staff, and I was starting to talk about it, and I was talking about the different ways we can engage with content. Are we talking about student to student interactions, student to teacher? And, and I'm talking about that. And I was like, I need to be really purposeful in my sessions, modeling all of those different types of interactions. It made my sessions so much better because I was purposefully including time for my students or my teachers to interact with each other and modeling what that looked like. So it wasn't something scary for them. They weren't like, oh my God, my kids are going into a breakout room. They're going to do blah, blah, and modeling that teacher to student interaction and, modeling the, student to, content interactions. I was modeling those things. So then they were less scary versus so many times we sit in meetings and we're being talked at, and we don't want to talk at we don't want to talk at our students. Our students certainly don't want us to talk at them all the time.
Well, I'm going to interrupt that thought, because I think you said we don't necessarily want to just talk at our students, but then you changed it and said our students don't want us to talk at them. I think that second part is true. I think the first part, there are a lot of us that simply want to talk at students. There are a lot of us that do that, whether it's adult students or child or adolescent students. We do like that. We do like hearing ourselves be the expert in the room. We do like other people hearing our wisdom and our expertise. I was one of those teachers that fell for that trap very early on in my career, where I always wanted to be the smartest person in the room. Always. even if it was just, I was surrounded by 12-year-olds. I needed the 12-year-olds to know how smart I was. And I loved to talk to them so they could hear how smart I was. This podcast that we're doing right now, it started 4 or 5 years ago, because at that point in my life, I thought I had so much that I needed to share with everybody. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to hear me talk. It wasn't until I started amplifying other voices and saying there are other people out there that are so much smarter and have so much better life experiences than me, that people started buying in and listening. And I think it's important for people to understand what you just said. It might feel good for us to speak. It might feel good for us to hold the mic in our hand and speak at our audience. But unless we're turning it around and saying, we want to hear from you, we need to hear your needs. We want to hear where you need to learn and grow. And I want to stand beside you. We're not going to see traction. So I appreciate that you made that pivot and said, well, our students don't necessarily want that, because you're spot on. Sorry, I had to interrupt that.
No. And that's absolutely fine. And I just, I feel very strongly about that fact. And, we're switching to a new LMS right now. Well, all of the models are asynchronous learning models. Is that how we want our students to learn? And so, just thinking about those things, I know the professional development sessions that I get the best traction from are ones where I share things and then I give participants a chance to interact and process. And sometimes so many things are being thrown at us that we can't process and reflect. And it just keeps that, it's that whole, and my goal is, I've been an overwhelmed teacher. I know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help teachers, but more than that, I want to help teachers help their students. And so, really being purposeful in that, and really thinking about, as I work with teachers, I'm never going to show teachers how to do something that I don't feel like will ultimately benefit students or will benefit themselves. I'm a huge proponent of being a connected educator, because that's going to benefit their students as well.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. And I'm going to try to model that for everybody else right now, because I know people listen to podcasts. Podcasts are a great place to simply consume information. It's not necessarily a place to interact. But I mean, if people want to interact, feel free to subscribe and share this with other people. I mean, hey, if you really want to go that extra mile, feel free. But for the people that are consuming this information right now, you've shared a lot of wisdom with them. I mean, you've shared your personal journey, your professional journey. You've shared your beliefs about adult learning and adult professional development, as well as the specific and unique needs of child and adolescent learning. So speaking right now to the larger audience that's actually listening to this and consuming this right now, and that are trying to figure out what is their big takeaway from this, I want you to imagine that right now you are doing one of those big keynotes, that the entire world is listening to you right now, and you got that microphone in your hand and you've just been preaching at them. What is it that you want them to know right before you drop that mic and walk off the stage? What is that thing that you might not ever see them again? You might not be able to give them that side-by-side coaching that they desperately need and would help support them, but you still want to have a huge impact in their world and in their life. You still want them to take something away from their experience with Debbie Tannenbaum. Debbie, what is that mic drop moment that you would have for everybody right now?
It's funny, because as you said that, I first thought one thing and then I switched to another thing in my head.
Share them both. You got the mic in your hand before you drop it.
So the first thing I thought about was the importance of being a connected educator.
Yeah.
Being a connected educator has truly and profoundly changed my life. I say all the time that I was an okay teacher, and I'm being 100% transparent. I definitely had my strengths and my weaknesses as a classroom teacher. But when I became a connected educator, it was only in 2017. It's not that long ago. It activated something inside of me and exposed me to things that I could have never imagined the impact they would have. I love the fact that I get to interact with educators all over the world, that it's not just about talking to ed tech coaches, but I can talk to superintendents, I can talk to principals, I can talk to assistant principals, I can talk to curriculum directors, etc. But I'm talking to educators and I'm learning about education in a much more global thing, that in our mastermind, we can take a problem and really, figure it out. So that was the first thing that popped in my mind. The second thing is that it's that whole idea that if you don't take risks, you really won't make progress. I
Yeah.
definitely embrace that whole mantra lately. And, the idea, I'm putting myself out there for things. And sometimes the answer is no, but the answer is always no if I don't. Jen Manley on the Teach Better Talk podcast said that over a year ago now, and it just sticks with me. People say it's that whole idea of don't say someday or one day. If it's something that you really feel passionate about, go for it. I just feel like we tell our students to have a growth mindset, and we tell our students to be lifelong learners, yet sometimes we hold back. And if we're holding back, our students are going to sense that. And so we really need to model those things. My students know that I present. My students know that I have a book because a couple of teachers came in and told them, but they know those things. They know that that I'm doing these things. And so I can say to them, you really created something great here, but we usually takes 11 ideas to come up with the best idea. Can you give me a couple more tries? And they know that I'm living that, and I'm not just feeding them a line.
Yeah.
So I just really feel like, put your voice, don't just be a consumer, create, share your story. Everyone's story is valuable. And I learn from your story. You learn from my story. No one has a story just like yours. So you need to make sure that you're continuing to add to your story and that you're sharing it with others.
Awesome. Well said. And right now I want you to picture the world listening to you, standing to their feet and clapping, saying encore, encore. They want you to come back off, but you can't because you're running to your limo, getting ready to get in your private jet, flying to your house in Fiji. You'll come back and see them again someday, but you're going to leave them waiting for more, waiting for the sequel. But Debbie, if people do want to connect with you as a connected educator, and they want to continue to learn more about your story and where you're at, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how do people connect with you?
Well, the best way is I'm very active on Twitter. It's Tannenbaum Tech. I also have my website, Tannenbaum Tech, as well. You can also, feel free to, I'm also on Facebook at Debbie L. Tannenbaum. So that's another place you can reach me, but Twitter is really the place where I mostly live. I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn and a couple of other places, but Twitter's where I started, and Twitter's kind of where my heart is. And so definitely connect with me there. And if you want to connect with me in other ways, you can always reach out through my website. I spent a lot of time really trying to add value to my website, because it's where it all started, was with my blog. And so I really want to make sure that my blog provides value to people who, decide to come and read my content, whether they're reading about tech tips or whether they're reading about, trying to take those risks and push myself. We all have to help each other, because being an educator is really hard. It's rewarding work, but it's hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. So people, if you want to be overachiever, feel free to read the show notes. All of those things will be linked down there. If not, if you're that auditory listener and you got all that and you know how to find Tannenbaum Tech, feel free, connect with Debbie. You will you will definitely benefit from that connection. She is absolutely incredible. She is smart. She is passionate. She's open. She's honest. She's transparent. She's vulnerable. She's all the things that you're looking for in a connection. So reach out to Debbie and make that connection happen. Debbie, thank you so much again for somebody that is doing all the things. I know how busy your life is. So finding time to have this connection with me and with all the listeners is so appreciated. Thank you so much.
No, this was my pleasure. This was really great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.